Warning signs of Armageddon. For billions of people around the world, Jerusalem is the site of the apocalypse, the gateway to heaven and to hell. Its name means place of peace, but it's probably the bloodiest city the world has ever known. In the 4,000 years Jerusalem has been on the map, it's been destroyed and rebuilt 17 times and ruled by at least 25 different peoples, every one of whom thought they alone had the right to claim it. I mean, even today there are heavily armed police around every corner. The tension here hasn't gone away, and many believe we're closer than ever to the end of days. But in a city as old and turbulent as Jerusalem, the best clues about Judgment Day are found in only one place: the underground. In the heart of Jerusalem, there's one spot that represents the end of days more than any other. And to truly understand the apocalypse, we have to head to what may be the most hotly contested property in all the world. This 45-acre stone platform I'm walking on is the heart of Jerusalem and a key to the apocalypse. It's called the Temple Mount, or in Arabic, Al-Haram Sharif. And one of the reasons this place is important to billions of people across the planet is, well, a rock. It's inside this gorgeous, heavily guarded building. It's the spot where, according to Muslims, Muhammad ascended directly to heaven. And for Jews and Christians, it happens to be the same spot where they claim Abraham survived his test of faith with God. So, for the three religions, it is ground zero. Jewish philosophers believe that rock in there holds the world together. The world was created from that rock. You move that rock, total chaos. The Dome of the Rock is the oldest Islamic building in the world, dating back to 691. But according to legend, the great Jewish temples stood on the same spot as the Dome of the Rock. The dispute over who has the right to claim the one rock is still the source of fierce debate. Today it's under the authority of the Supreme Muslim Council, but we've been given extremely rare access to go inside. In fact, we're one of the few non-Muslim TV crews to have ever entered the site.
Look at this. So this is the rock. This is the reason the dome is here. The place where Muhammad ascended to heaven.
Beneath this sacred rock is a natural cave where many Muslims believe all souls will await their final judgment on the day of the apocalypse.
Non-Muslims are not allowed down here. Very rare opportunity to get below the rock. This is the cave of the Prophet Muhammad. This is one of the holiest spots in all of Islam.
According to the Jewish tradition, the rock above was the first part of earth God created, and the cave beneath was called the Well of Souls. But this cave also has a dark side. It's said that if the waters of chaos that run beneath it are unleashed, the world would be destroyed. In fact, it's said that the water that caused the Great Flood and forced Noah to build his ark came from right here.
It is truly a holy, special site. Just look at this place. It's kind of the ultimate underground, isn't it?
But this is just the beginning of the story. The site was so sacred to the Jews that many believe King Solomon built his incredible temple here. Its construction and engineering was so advanced and impressive that it came to represent God's kingdom here on earth. Built almost 3,000 years ago, the Temple of Solomon was the crowning glory of the Jewish people. For them, it was God's palace on earth. At 90 feet wide and 180 feet long, it covered 1,600 square feet and stood on the same spot the Dome of the Rock stands on today. King Solomon built his temple to stand until the end of time so it could hold the world's greatest treasure, the Ark of the Covenant, a sacred container that allegedly held the original stone tablets inscribed with the Ten Commandments, the Word of God. So its massive stone walls would have to be made of the strongest rock they could find.
Legend has it the place I'm going was once the quarries used by King Solomon to build his great temple. I'm meeting a guy who basically spent his life investigating Jerusalem's secret history.
My guide, Moish Maus,
Let's go.
took me deep beneath the streets of Jerusalem.
pharaohs, huh?
Is huge.
It is. It's 9,000 square meters. This is the largest artificial cave in the country.
So you walk right off the street, busy Jerusalem out there, and into this
Here we are.
massive mammoth cave right in the middle of town. How deep are we down?
40, 50 meters.
So more than 100 feet below the ground here.
More than 100 feet below.
At its deepest point, this quarry is 1,000 feet below the streets. It's a massive system of tunnels and caves that snake below downtown Jerusalem, underneath shops, homes, and busy streets. The fact that the modern city above never collapsed into this enormous cavern is a testament to the strength of the rock, something the ancient Jewish engineers were counting on when they built their only temple to God. 3,000 years ago, the huge stones quarried from here could well have been taken out of the underground and used to build Solomon's temple.
You can see
the actual
exactly the actual parts.
Amazing. So we're really seeing where the building blocks of the temples were taken from right here.
Yeah.
It's said that as many as 70,000 men toiled to bring up thousands of tons of stone from this quarry to build the foundation of Solomon's temple. But in 586 BC, almost 400 years after it was built, the temple was destroyed when the Babylonians sacked the city. King Zedekiah, the king of Judea at the time, tried to escape in these quarry tunnels under Jerusalem.
They believed that somehow there was a hidden way for him to escape all the way to Jericho.
But Zedekiah was unable to escape.
He was caught by the Babylons. They tortured him. They killed, in front of his eyes, they killed his two sons. And then they just took his two eyes off. He became blind.
At the end of the battle, the Babylonians had humiliated and killed the king of Judea, sacked the city, slaughtered 100,000 people, and enslaved the rest, exiling them to Babylon. Worst of all, they razed the holy temple to the ground. For the people of Jerusalem, this was the first apocalypse.
This destruction of everything precious to the Jewish people, this was the beginning, really, of their notion of apocalypse.
Yes.
That things could end.
And the apocalyptic prophecies are talking about the big war in the future between the light and the dark. Armageddon, whatever it will be, it is supposed to make the whole future different.
Right.
With the apocalyptic.
And we're standing where that mentality has begun.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Up next, inside these desert caves, the cryptic writings of a secret sect reveal a prophecy of doom.
They literally made a guidebook for war, but their big war.
And later,
Be careful.
our cameras are rolling as the very den of the Knights Templar is revealed for the first time.
Oh, you can see in the room there.
For thousands of years, Jewish temples were built facing west in order to pray towards the Western Wall in Jerusalem. Just outside Jerusalem, the whole world seems to disappear into miles and miles of desert wilderness. It's pretty rough terrain. It's intensely hot and barren as far as the eye can see. This is where the Christian Bible says Jesus battled the devil's temptation. And it does look like the end of the earth. And for some, it really did mean the end of the world. In fact, some of the first clues we have about the apocalypse were buried right up in these hills. The secret writings of an ancient apocalyptic sect who produced the most important archaeological find of our times, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Less than an hour's drive from Jerusalem, the Dead Sea lies between Israel and the Kingdom of Jordan. At over 1,300 feet below sea level, its shores are the lowest point on Earth. 500 years after the Jews suffered their first apocalyptic scenario with the destruction of King Solomon's temple, a puritanical sect called the Essenes set out into this harsh, barren environment to usher in a new civilization and prepare for an ultimate battle against the forces of evil. Their lost scrolls are the oldest known biblical documents in the world, revealing some of the most terrifying descriptions about the apocalypse, predictions and prophecies that foretold their own demise. Many of the Dead Sea Scrolls were copies of ancient Jewish texts, like the oldest written copy of the Ten Commandments. But the Essenes were surrounded by two giant empires, the Parthians and Romans. The constant threat of war that surrounded them was evident in two especially ominous scrolls. The Book of Giants tells of a group of demons who were released onto Earth, spawning a race of giants that terrorized humanity. And the War Scroll describes an ultimate battle, one the Essenes would see in their lifetime, that would bring their world to a violent end. But these weren't just cryptic verses. The War Scroll was a field manual for the apocalypse, the story of a war written years before it was fought.
This is Avner Goran. He's an Israeli archaeologist who's going to take us to see where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, right down the road here. Avner, why did they choose this part of the world to come to, the Essenes?
Well, it was fulfilling few things that they looked for. One of them is being away from society, being away from urban and cultivated areas. And the desert is always standing for purity, for a place that you can see nature as it was created by God at the beginning.
The Essenes were radicals. They believed their strict vision of Judaism was the most pure. They even thought their fellow Jews in Jerusalem had been spiritually corrupted by the decadent ways of the Roman Empire, which ruled over the entire region with an iron fist. In the 1st century, the Essenes moved here and built a fortified city called Qumran. Here, they would defend themselves against the powers of evil and rise to victory in the ultimate struggle, the apocalypse. Living in their isolated stronghold, the Essenes wrote about 900 scrolls on leather parchments over a span of 200 years. The secret remote location and dry desert air helped preserve them for 2,000 years. And when they were eventually found, they literally rewrote history.
We should be careful. It's very narrow and slippery here.
Now, you could slip and go 1,000 feet down there. Careful, careful. God, look how fragile it is. This whole landscape is just ready to fall apart here. And this is a cave where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. Amazing.
Well, we should be very careful when we approach the cave. As a matter of fact, people are not allowed to get here because of trying to preserve it.
Sure. God, you gotta understand what a privilege this is to do this. Look how fragile the caves are. These are crumbling away. One day, not too far in the future, these caves won't even be here. We're one of the last generations to actually get to explore them. So this was where they found the scrolls?
Yes, not all of them, but large quantity of scrolls.
So this is one of how many caves?
11 caves contain scrolls.
So this was actually made by the Essenes?
That's made by the Essenes as a place where they spend their nights.
So this was literally a residence that we're in here?
Yes, it was a residence, only for nighttime.
Okay.
Today, these caves are open to the side of the mountain. But in the 1st century, it would have looked very different. 2,000 years ago, these canyons and cliffs were neatly carved by the Essenes into a network of footpaths and caves. The perfect place to await the impending battle and hide their sacred scrolls. Over the past 2,000 years, the caves and pathways have eroded, making them dangerous and difficult to access.
Many of these caves are connected or were connected at one point. Look at this tiny little ledge here. Goes over what was a connected pathway has now collapsed down further. It's really... Whoa.
To prepare for the inevitable apocalypse, this otherwise peaceful community studied one unusually violent text, the Scroll of War. The scroll depicts the ultimate battle against the sons of darkness. The war would last over 35 years and would be waged against nearly a dozen tribes and just about every powerful empire in the world as they knew it. It even explains specific preparations, from sacrificial rituals to battle formations and tactics.
They literally made a guidebook for war, for their big war.
How to organize the army, how to fight, armors and things.
So literally specifics on regiments and how to build an army and so forth. All of this was written, scrolled up, and found in one of these caves.
In 68 AD, after centuries of preparation, the Essenes finally fought the battle foretold in the War Scroll. All over Judea, Jews were revolting against the oppressive Roman rule, and the Essenes joined the fight when a massive Roman army attacked Qumran. The apocalypse was at hand, but before fighting to the death, they did something that would change the world forever.
When the Romans approached the place and to destroy everything, they hide the most valuable things for them, and those were the scrolls. Here, Most of them were probably hidden within special jars that were made specially for it.
For almost 2,000 years, the scrolls lay hidden in these caves, long forgotten by the world, until one day in 1947, when a young Bedouin shepherd stumbled on this cave and found the greatest ancient discovery of our time. Once experts began looking further, more and more scrolls were found in nearby caves.
Here we are.
Oh, yeah.
Is another large cave.
Oh, cool.
Where about 31 scrolls have been discovered.
Real. Look, you can see where they did the main excavation down here. This had to have been where they found the scrolls buried. Look, it just keeps on going back there. Imagine, you're under attack. The Essenes, they bring the scrolls here up to these chambers and hide them, expecting, fully expecting, to come back and pick them up. But they don't. They lose the battle. They're cut to pieces by the Romans. And as a result, the scrolls remain hidden for 2,000 years. The Essenes die. The scrolls live on, underground, in these caves. And with them, the vision of the apocalypse.
Up next, for the first time on TV, the buried secrets and last stronghold of the Knights Templar.
1,000-year-old passageway right through this way.
And later, the underground of the final battle, Armageddon.
This is where the battle between good and evil would take place.
This is where the ultimate battle on the great day of God Almighty will take place.
The Bible is the bestseller of all time, with more than 50 copies sold every minute. It's also the most shoplifted book in the world.
About 3 hours north of Jerusalem, in what is one of the oldest cities in the world, Akko. Now, what makes this city totally unique is that it was built upwards, not outwards. Beneath this marketplace, beneath the whole city, is an underworld constructed about 1,000 years ago. It was the site of total bloodbaths, horrible massacres, the front lines of an earth-shattering holy war. Archaeologists tell us that less than 10% of this underworld has been excavated. But what they have found may hold secrets of the Knights Templar, the Great Crusades, and why this ancient world was poised on the edge of doomsday.
In the 11th century, Christian knights from across Europe took an oath to annihilate the Muslims, whom they considered infidels, and expel them from the holy city of Jerusalem. For both sides, this wasn't just a war of conquest, it was a holy war, a final battle between the forces of good and evil. For the knights, good meant Christianity, and evil, the Muslim infidels. The Catholic Pope used apocalyptic rhetoric to inspire knights from around Europe to fight and kill the Muslim enemy, the greatest threat to Christianity. But controlling Jerusalem meant conquering its gateway city, Akko. In 1104, the Christian knights finally succeeded in conquering Akko, sweeping across the Holy Land and slaughtering tens of thousands of Muslims, Jews, and non-believers along the way, all in an attempt to secure Jerusalem for the final judgment day, the apocalypse. The city was divided into sections, each controlled by knights from a different order. The Teutonics in the east, the Hospitallers in the north, and the most powerful of all, the Order of the Temple, or Knights Templar, in the south, where they protected and controlled access to the port. I met up with Akko's head archaeologist, Eliezer Stern.
This is the city beneath the city here.
Right. This is the Crusader city from the 12th and 13th century. And we are in the Ottoman city that built in the last 200 years.
Akko flourished under the Crusader Knights for nearly 200 years, but that wouldn't last. Christianity and Islam would soon face off once again, and the Crusader city would be lost forever. Until now.
Oh, wow.
This is the dining room of the Crusader. That means the military order. They used to live here daily, more than 500 people.
900 years ago, this hall would have been filled with Christian crusaders with one goal in mind: to steal Jerusalem from the infidels. Few could have imagined the bloodbath that was about to take place, a battle where Islam triumphed over Christianity. burying the Crusaders and eventually their most prized stronghold, 40 feet beneath the ground. It all happened at the turn of the 14th century when Egyptian warrior slaves, known as Mamluks, stormed through the Holy Land with a vengeance. After a lengthy battle, they slaughtered every last knight inside and destroyed the city to ensure none would return. It worked. The Crusaders were gone from the Holy Land for good. 2 centuries later, the city we see today was built. The Ottoman Turks came into town and built directly on top of the ruins.
That's the street level right there. They found this hall, this Knight's Hall, completely filled with rubble, just buried. And they removed that rubble and they found what you see right here. These arches here, these massive pillars, everything was intact.
It's amazing that this room has lasted this long, and the fact that it's so eerily empty is something the powerful Crusaders could never have imagined. This particular dining hall was used by an order of knights called the Hospitallers. Originally, the order provided medical care for pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem, but as the battle for the Holy Land intensified, the Hospitallers took up arms and joined the fight. But this room is just the beginning. The entire buried fortress spans up to 3 square miles and snakes underneath the entire city up above.
Look, goes off in either direction, both ways.
From sewer tunnels and latrines to hidden subterranean Templar meeting rooms.
Look at this thing, look at this place. It's unbelievable.
And top secret military tunnels.
If you were in a siege, this would be a military operation down here, moving supplies and soldiers throughout.
Everything in this system is still in perfect shape, holding up the modern city above.
We're about 45 feet beneath the modern day streets, about 12 feet or so below the Crusaders. And this is what's holding all that up.
We had entered into the Hospitaller quarter and walked through the meeting halls and living quarters to this, one of the most strategic tunnels in the entire complex.
So what did they use this tunnel for?
It's a secret passway. It's a strategic passway that connects the Templar quarter into the port.
The Templars were renowned as the ultimate protectors of the Christian world, a top-secret military order who killed in the name of Christ. They were called the first warrior monks of the Western world, and I was standing in their now-buried nerve center.
Above us, we can see one room of the Templar order. This is underground of the Ottoman city.
Okay.
And this is the remains of the Crusader city, and this is actually underground of the Crusader city.
So we're 3 layers down here.
Right.
All right, I understand. So why did they construct this tunnel? What would they use it for?
The Templar are the first bankers of Europe. They used to take a lot of money from the pilgrims to bring it to the Holy Land, and it wasn't safe for them to move a lot of money in the 13th century.
Right. So they held the money from the pilgrims to keep it safe.
Yes.
But it also had a strategic value, right?
Yes, of course, they are knights. It's a military order.
Yeah.
If they want to move their knights, their horses, their weapons, whatever, they need a private passway.
That meant it all went down right here. In these secret tunnels, the Knights Templar, as well as the other orders of Christian knights, fought fiercely to protect the Holy Land from constant attack on all sides. After all, if they lost Akko to the Muslims, they'd lose the kingdom of God. And that's exactly what happened in the 14th century when the powerful Muslim army of Mamluks rode in. Today, archaeologists have only uncovered 10% of this buried Christian city. And no one knows what clues are yet to be uncovered about the mysterious Knights Templar. In fact, as our cameras were rolling, Eliezer alerted us to a brand new discovery just up the street. For the first time on television, we're going to see a newly discovered hole that leads down into the Crusader level of Akko.
So here's the deal. This building here was bought by a private developer. Anytime that happens in Akko, the archaeological experts have to check out if there's something underneath, which of course there is, because there's something underneath everywhere in this city. So they have to check it out, and we're going down now.
This site was literally just uncovered recently. Eliezer believes this structure was part of the massive Crusader complex. So could this have been used as a secret meeting place for the legendary Knights Templar?
Okay, so we are in the Ottoman level.
Okay.
And there is a very, very small hatch going down into the Crusader level.
Very cool.
And you can see that it's completely full with dirt, debris, and everything.
Can we get down in there?
Be careful. Be careful.
Yeah.
A lot of debris.
This space was lost and sealed up for nearly 900 years. It's a major find, and from here, the ultimate treasure hunt begins.
We are 10 feet above the floor level of this room, and you can see only the edge of the doorway.
Well, let's look at this. I just want to see if I can get a look at it.
The structure beyond this small hole was abandoned nearly 1,000 years ago, and these rocks were all that kept us from getting inside a time capsule dating back to some of the world's bloodiest days.
You see, and there is another room there.
Oh, you can see in the room there. All right, let's get serious about this.
Okay. You're feeling like Indiana Jones?
Yeah, exactly.
The story. We are not going to play a lot more than this because it could be a crash and stone can fall.
I can't slip back there?
No. It's very, very dangerous.
Moving one rock could mean the modern city above would come crashing down on the ancient one below. Eliezer and the authorities wouldn't let us go any farther into this new site until they secure it against collapses. But this brief glimpse into the past, just one of Akko's countless secrets, is still buried in its underworld.
There's 10, 12 feet beneath you here. But there's a whole other room, a whole other passage. And the whole city is like this. 1,000-year-old passageway right through this way. If you could get through.
Rooms like these are often the only hope to unlocking the mystery of the Armageddon that happened right here, when Islam put an end to Christian rule in the Holy Land, burying it forever. Up next, is this the sacred cave of John the Baptist?
So you may be putting your foot in a place that John the Baptist put his foot.
And later, the underworld of Armageddon.
The mountain of Megiddo, Armageddon, right above our heads.
Armageddon.
That's where we are. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Friday the 13th is superstitious because on that day in October 1307, thousands of Templars were arrested, tortured, and executed.
After the Jews returned from exile in Babylon, this is way before Christ, they just wanted a better world. But it wasn't a few centuries before Rome had this place and them in an iron grip. So the idea of a Messiah, a savior, someone who could save their world began to catch fire, even reaching a fever pitch with certain radical apocalyptic sects. So preachers like John the Baptist began to preach that there was an urgency to cleansing the soul, purifying the spirit in preparation for the big day, because he was convinced the end of everything was right around the corner.
I met with archaeologist Shimon Gibson at the Church of St. John the Baptist in the town of Inkarab, the traditional birthplace of the legendary preacher. In March of 2000, Shimon discovered a cave he believes could have been used for ritual baptism by John the Baptist. The fiery preacher was a contemporary and possibly a relative of Jesus. It could be one of the only artifacts left behind by a key figure from the New Testament, and one of the biggest discoveries of our time. But Shimon's findings are highly controversial and hotly debated by scholars. Shimon believes important clues prove that this cave holds a secret to the famous preacher's ancient ritual of baptism and to the final day of judgment.
Amazing, isn't it?
You found this?
Yes. And I excavated it.
That must have been incredible for you.
Well, I tell you, at the time when we came into this cave, you couldn't stand. You had to crawl in all the way up there.
Oh, I see.
The soil was really high.
Shimon discovered this site when a local found a narrow crawl space along a hillside. Shimon investigated the site, and shortly after squeezing through, began to suspect this may be the cave of John the Baptist. At the time, it was filled to the ceiling with debris. But how could the cave of such a revered man, a man who even today is considered a prophet by both Muslims and Christians, just disappear for centuries? The cave goes back to 800 BC, when the hillside was dug out to access a spring beneath it. For centuries, this spring was used by Jews as a mikveh, or a ritual bath. Sometime around the 11th century, the cave was abandoned. Over the years, rainstorms flooded the cave, filling it with sediment, until 2000, when Shimon and his team unearthed mysterious clues to the signature ritual of the fiery Jewish preacher.
Many people just sort of say this is an oval cut into the surface of the rock, but it's only when you take off your shoe and you put in your right foot that you see that it fits. All those skeptics who said, oh, it's just an oval in the top of a rock, when I get them to take their shoe off, they sort of are immediately convinced.
Let's try this. What size foot are you? 10. I'm perfect for this hole.
This size 10 foothold is ideal for the kind of baptismal ceremony performed by John the Baptist. Jews had been using this cave as a ritual bath for centuries, but John's baptism wasn't to cleanse the body for prayer. Shimon claims John the Baptist used this cave to cleanse the soul for Judgment Day. The preacher they called John the Baptist was born roughly around the same time as Jesus, but was preaching his fiery and radical message long before anyone knew who Jesus was. He attracted a large ministry by condemning the hypocrisy of the Jewish elite, especially its powerful ruler, King Herod. He baptized people in the Jordan River and warned his ministry that the Messiah was coming in their lifetime.
Let me show you what would have been done. Somebody would have crouched here, I'm crouching, and then using the jug, I would then pour oil over your foot. It would signify the fact that you had now undergone the process of baptism, so you were ritually prepared. So you may be putting your foot in a place that John the Baptist put his foot.
Amazing.
Several other key clues led Shimon to his controversial theory. The cave is near John the Baptist's birthplace, and when Shimon uncovered the baptismal well, he discovered several primitive drawings and cryptic symbols, possible links to the first-century preacher.
Got to climb up here. It's a bit slippery, but
This is all good, right? Like the organist?
yes.
All right, so I can see the full figure. This is John the Baptist right here.
Yes. What's important, he's wearing this hairy garment. And of course, we know from the Gospels that he wore a garment made out of camel hair.
On the opposite wall, several more cryptic symbols associated with John the Baptist were found, including his signature staff, as well as 3 Christian crosses that have been chiseled away over the centuries. Shimon believes that 1,000 years after John's death, early Christians and primitive monks came here to honor him, leaving behind this ancient graffiti.
If this was current with John the Baptist, then it was also current with Jesus. Is it possible to say that he might have been here?
It's mentioned in the Gospels, Jesus comes and supervises a process of baptism. Why not in a cave that used to be connected to the rites as performed by John the Baptist? Maybe some evidence will be found one day.
According to the Gospels, John baptized Jesus and immediately recognized him as the long-awaited Son of God. John was sure the coming of the new world had arrived.
The idea is you're baptized in order to prepare yourself for the coming of Elijah or the Messiah,
Right.
who then will preempt the end of time.
But soon after he baptized Jesus, John was imprisoned for condemning Herod. Months later, he was beheaded in public. John the Baptist wouldn't live to see his prophecy fulfilled about the coming of the Messiah. Up next, the prophecy in the book of Revelations and the actual site of the final battle between good and evil. The word crusade means a war of the cross.
Say the word Armageddon, and people instantly think of fire, brimstone, earthquakes, and floods. The total destruction of the earth as we know it. It's where Jesus and Satan duke it out in a final battle between good and evil. But this isn't just a wild vision. It's a real place. It's called Megiddo.
Located 70 miles northwest of Jerusalem, overlooking the Jezreel Valley. Megiddo today bears little resemblance to the great city-state it once was. But buried under this hill are 26 layers of ancient cities, the result of 4,000 years of natural disasters and bloody battles, which inspired a Christian outlaw to write a terrifying prediction of the apocalypse called the Book of Revelation.
Hey, Steve.
Steve Langford is a local guide who has pieced together the clues to Megiddo's violent past and its ominous link to Armageddon. Almost 4,000 years ago, Megiddo was a major Canaanite city that commanded an important trade route between Egypt and Mesopotamia. Because of its immense strategic importance, Megiddo was constantly besieged, from about 4,000 years ago until it was mysteriously abandoned in the 4th century BC. One of the biggest battles came 3,500 years ago, fought between the Egyptians and the Canaanites. In fact, an ancient Egyptian scroll that describes the battle is the first written documentation of any battle in history.
Pharaoh Thutmose III, within the first battle for which we have a description in history, 1468 BC, writes, "The taking of Megiddo is worth the taking of 1,000 cities." The problem of Megiddo and of many other cities was that the spring was not inside the city. It lay just at the foot of the hill on the outside. Supposing you're under siege.
Right.
The enemy has access to the spring, you don't. You got a problem.
Sure.
From the first recorded battle 4,000 years ago to the final Battle of Armageddon, water has been and always will be key to the city's survival. The spring that provided water to Megiddo was built away from the city center, so if it was besieged, the local army would quickly run out of water. In the 9th century BC, engineers came up with a solution, the Megiddo Water Tunnel, an amazing feat of engineering built with simple iron tools.
So this is their original excavation that we're looking at here.
This is it. This is the shaft that they dug straight down into bedrock.
Look at that.
Originally, they had a winding staircase where we are.
Whoa. So they cut this hole out with bare hands, basically, hand tools.
Yeah, that's what they had. But they were determined that they had to do it. Necessity is the mother of invention.
Right.
From this 105 feet deep vertical shaft, a horizontal tunnel was cut through the rock, passing right beneath the city walls. The engineers dug the tunnel directly to the source of the spring. So in the 9th century BC, after countless attacks and sieges, Megiddo had finally secured a safe water source underground. The city was ready for the ultimate battle.
So everybody has come here and tried to attack this for thousands of years.
Yeah, and that's part of the whole background. You can see the relationship in the sound between the word Megiddo and Armageddon. Har means mountain. Megiddon would be Megiddo. So
I see.
The mountain of Megiddo.
In fact, Megiddo is mentioned specifically in the book of Revelation as the site of the apocalypse, or Armageddon.
We get it in Revelation,
Okay.
chapter 16. And I saw 3 evil spirits that looked like frogs. They came out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and they go out to the kings of the whole world to gather them for the battle on the great day of God Almighty. And they gathered the kings together to the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon.
And this is where the battle between good and evil would take place.
But why Megiddo? Because of its long history of major wars, the name Megiddo was synonymous with ultimate war, like Antietam, Normandy, or Iwo Jima is today. It may also be linked to an invasion in 70 AD when the Roman armies gathered at Megiddo before they sacked Jerusalem. But there's also evidence that John the Evangelist, the author of the book of Revelation, wasn't prophesizing an ancient battle. Revelation 9:16 says that an army of 200 million will be assembled on this same hill. As the world's population rises, it's increasingly possible for a coalition of countries to amass an army of that size, a number that was unthinkable even 100 years ago. For thousands of years, Jerusalem has been the center of the world's fiercest struggles. And deep beneath the Holy Land, new mysteries about Judgment Day are waiting to be discovered. But the quest for survival between East and West now hangs in the balance. Perhaps the natural disasters that have rocked the planet serve as warning signs of impending doom.